Uh, Rick, are you ready with TV 34? Okay.
Just let us know.
Just a quick welcome and congratulations to the new members.
Thanks so much. Great to be part of the team. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is posted in accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act and is provided by a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building, also by publishing a copy in the local newspaper and posting on the town's website, and also posting a notice on the main access door of the municipal building. We are being broadcast live on Channel 34, and we are streaming live and will be available on demand on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and that we are obligated to determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to those issues that the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Members of the public will be automatically placed on mute until such time as in the meeting it is appropriate for them to ask questions or make comments. At that time, they will be unmuted, and in the event we cannot establish an audio connection, members of the public can direct their questions to Ms. Talley, the board secretary, through the chat function or the question and answer function on the WebEx. And as a last resort, if none of that works, can be sent by email to jtalley at montclairnjusa.org. That's JTALLEY at montclairnjusa.org. The first thing on our roll call, on our agenda rather this evening, is our roll call. And in conjunction with that, I'd just like to note that we have two new members sitting with us this evening, two new members to the board. And I'd like to extend an official welcome to Jeff Jacobson and Michael Graham as the new members. And we're happy to have you. And
thank you very much, Chairman.
Thanks so much.
Great
to be part of the team.
And
I'd also like to extend our thanks and appreciation and best wishes for the member who has stepped off of the board. And that would be, oh God, I've gone blank.
Stephen Rooney.
Steve Rooney. Steve, please don't take it personally. It's just been a long day. But Steve, trust me, you will be missed, and we hope that you will still be available from time to time if we need you and your expertise. So, with that said, we can move on to our roll call, and I'm here mostly.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
I'm going alphabetically from now on, so just to give you a little heads up. Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally. Guess he's not here.
It's unusual.
Yeah, I'll have to double check who the call-in user is. Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Councillor Schlager.
Here.
Mayor Spiller.
Present, and also want to extend my welcome to Jeff and Michael as well. Welcome, and looking forward to working with you and serving with you here. And also, Stephen, just want to also thank him for all his service as well, and present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Miss Willis is excused. Mr. Gilmer. I believe you're here. Mr. Gilmer, yeah, I see your name. You have to unmute yourself. Daniel, are you
Yeah.
here? Okay.
Yes, here. There
All
we
right.
go.
The alternates I have at the end of the list. That's why I didn't skip over you when I said I was doing it in alphabetical order. And Mr. Jacobson.
I'm here.
Okay.
All right. Next thing on our agenda is our minutes from April 12th. And I've looked at some of the comments that were made that we received. I've got a couple of questions. So I would like to push any action on these minutes to our meeting next week, if no one has any objection.
Okay.
Oh, none heard?
I have a question.
Question?
I didn't see anybody else except me that made comments. Is that true?
That's true.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure.
Mr. Brodock has fallen down on the job.
He has.
Well, look, there's one spot where there's a zero instead of an O, or it's an uppercase O. I'll get that fixed for next time.
I'm sure you'll find the spaces, where I have a double space in there too, Keith.
I have to say, Word finds those automatically for me, so it makes my job really easy.
All right. Okay. With respect to the application that's next on our agenda from Montclair Acquisition Partners, that is also being pushed to next week. You recall at our last meeting, we left off that there were going to be some discussions between the board's attorney and the applicant's attorney with respect to the situations that we discussed during the meeting. It's my understanding that a draft of an agreement has been prepared of a proposal to the planning board, and that it is undergoing some final review and approving on with respect to the applicant. And when it is ready, when we hear back from the applicant and they're ready, then Arthur will release it to be presented to us. And the idea is that we will get it sometime during this coming week, so we'll have enough time to review it and digest it so that we can discuss it at the next meeting. Arthur, does that sound about right?
Just about right. I just want to make it clear for the record that it is the applicant who requested this continuation of their application, and that, of course, they're going to continue any and all dates that would otherwise apply. Insofar as the document itself, my hope is to get it to the board members as early as I can possibly do that. And this document, by the way, is what it is actually proposed conditions, so that for a resolution, one way or the other. So I just want to be clear about that.
So Arthur, these are conditions that both you and the applicant put together, not just the applicant, correct?
I would say more succinctly and accurately, I put the proposed conditions together and massaged them a little bit with Jerry Gios's help. I mean, a lot of it comes from him. And so I've massaged it a little bit. I've presented it to the applicant, and Mr. Troutner, is discussing it with his clients. And I expect that I will be speaking with him tomorrow. And again, my hope is to get it for the board to consider well in advance of next Monday's meeting, so that you have time to review it.
Thank you.
I do like your hair, Carmel.
Happy summer, happy spring.
Yeah, it's getting long.
All right, so that brings us to our new business, which is the application of 544 Bloomfield Avenue, LLC.
Okay. Mr. Trembulac, I've made you a panelist, and I've added Mr. Reynolds. Who else would you like me to make a panelist for your presentation?
And Janice, while Mr. Tremblay's connecting his audio, I'll just note that Mr. Ian Wally joined the meeting.
Oh, okay.
And Mark Best, I believe he's on.
Mark Bess, okay. Alan, are you there? Yeah, Alan, I've unmuted you.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Janice?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I think you indicated Mark Best. And it should be, maybe he's a little late, Olivier Muller. There he is.
Okay.
Okay, is everybody in the meeting now?
I think so. I have Olivia, Mr. Muller's part of the meeting, as is Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Bess. Although Mr. Bess, I don't think Mr. Bess has audio.
That wouldn't be good.
Yeah, I think you need to turn on your audio. Now he does. Okay, good.
Okay,
And Mr. Mueller, I don't see that you have audio either. I have Mr. Mueller, I have you on twice. I'm not sure which one has video, but I don't see that either of them has audio. So while they're working that out,
okay.
Alan.
Should I, Mr. Chairman, should I proceed?
Sure, we can get started. And
Okay.
as long as everybody can hear one another.
Okay, I just have a brief opening. For the record, Alan Trembulac appearing on behalf of the applicant 544 Bloomrest LLC. This is an application involving property located at 544 Bloomfield Avenue. It's an application for amended site plan approval for the Faubourg French restaurant located at 544 Bloomfield Avenue. The applicant previously received site plan approval from the Development Review Committee in 2019, and the restaurant opened for business shortly thereafter, I believe in July of 2019. If you've been to the restaurant, and I hope everyone has, you know there's a outdoor seating area or a courtyard located adjacent to the building in which the restaurant is located. What my client would like to do and what we're seeking approval for this evening is to install a retractable glass enclosure that would enclose, obviously, the outdoor seating area with a glass roof and glass sidewalls. And that's all we're seeking approval for. There are no other changes whatsoever to the restaurant building or the courtyard except for the construction of this enclosure over the outdoor seating area. There is one variance that we're requesting because this is a structure and therefore needs to comply with setback requirements. The rear yard setback requirement in the C1 Central Business District is 10 feet. We're proposing to locate the enclosure on the rear property line, which essentially aligns with the rear of the existing restaurant building, which is also on the property line, as well as the building next door. So the rear yard setback is consistent with what presently exists essentially on the adjoining properties. So that's the application we're seeking, amended site plan approval and the one variance. And I have two witnesses to present this evening. My first witness is Olivier Muller. Hopefully, he's been able to establish his audio connection.
I think so.
Okay.
Mr. Mueller, can you see me? This is Arthur Nee. May I ask you to raise your right hand, please? So do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Yes.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
My full name is Olivier Muller, and I'm the chef owner of Faubourg.
All right. Olivier, you just indicated you're the chef and one of the owners of the Faubourg restaurant, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And are you also a principal in the limited liability company known as 544 Bloomrest LLC? Okay. When did the restaurant first open for business?
We started in July 2019.
Okay. And in addition to the restaurant located in the building, there's an outdoor seating area or a courtyard adjacent to the building, correct?
That's correct.
And that area has been there since the restaurant opened in 2019?
That's correct.
All right. Can you just briefly tell the board what it is you're seeking to do or the improvement you're seeking to make for which we're seeking the board's approval this evening?
Well, as you know, with the difficulty of last year, we wanted to protect our outdoor seating with a more permanent solution. So,
Mr. Mueller, there's a lot of feedback on your audio. Do you have two sources of audio turned on? A telephone and a computer?
no. I'm trying
Okay.
to.
Okay, if everybody else can mute their microphones, maybe we can, except for Mr. Mueller and Mr. Trembulak, maybe we can reduce the feedback.
I'm not sure what to do now. Okay, so we plan this outdoor seating. I hear my second echo.
Mr. Trembulak, you may need to mute yourself too, and I know that's going to be a little bit awkward asking questions and responding, but let's give that a shot.
Okay. Can you hear me better now? It's better. So we planned this outdoor retractable roof to secure our ceiling, as we were limited last year and we lost a lot of revenue. We wanted to have something and then protect diner and allow them outdoor. And even if it's raining or if it's a little colder and such. So it's all glass and then we'll retract on our side of the building, and then I think it will preserve the feel of the outdoor. And I think it will match the building next door to it. This similar color of beams. I think it's not too intrusive, and then I was just and yeah, that's about it. It's a simple structure.
Fortunately, I only have a few questions, so I can mute and unmute myself a limited number of times. And is your intention then that you would be able to utilize the outdoor seating area on a year-round basis if the enclosure is installed?
Yes, we will do. I mean, we have been sitting people during the winter, even sometime during the rain, but it was a little complicated. And, to this day, still a lot of people don't want to come indoor, even being vaccinated. And then I think, we have situation when as soon as the weather forecasts some rain, we lose a lot of reservations. So that I think that will give more stability to our business. And then I think it's the main reason then we started to work on this project.
Okay, are you proposing to make any changes whatsoever to the building that contains the main restaurant?
No, I think as you mentioned, the ceiling remained the same capacity. The building is untouched and it just everything will remain the same.
Okay. And are you proposing to make any changes or other improvements to the outdoor courtyard other than installation of the retractable roof and sidewalls?
No, everything will remain the same.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Mueller.
Questions from the board?
I have a question. Okay. What happens when snows and there's a heavy snow? Is the structure open or closed at that time? And if it's closed, does it withstand a heavy snow sitting on it?
Yeah, I mean, Thomas, our architect, can explain. As all the loads, the snow load were calculated, and then there's cross beam there to support snow. But then even if in the case of a very heavy storm, we could keep it open for. But I think it's designed to support the snow.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. So when this application came before the Development Review Committee, I think there was a misunderstanding about the use of the door that goes into the new parking lot for the Bijou building that's being built. I believe the applicant thought that they would have access to that back door that leads into the garage. And I believe, Mr. Trembulak, that was going to be cleared up, that that back door is not open to anybody leaving the restaurant and going into the parking garage. Or I guess the resolution with the building on the 65 Church Street.
Yeah, that's been rectified, Ms. Lockman. Originally, there had been some earlier discussions with the owner of the what's now the parking lot, soon to be a multi-story building that the board approved, regarding an easement which will allow the roof to extend over. The plans have been revised. It's no longer proposed for the enclosure or anything to extend beyond the property line.
So it was cleared up that there's no access to that back door to the indoor garage from.
There's no access whatsoever. In fact, when we went and looked at the approved, the plans that this board approved for the building to be erected on the Church Street parking lot, the plans are very clear. They actually propose, I believe, a retaining wall as well as a fence, which would preclude any access between this property and the Church Street property.
Okay, thank you.
So there was obviously some misunderstanding in the past regarding someone from the property owner and someone from the Church Street. So we're no longer encroaching or extending beyond the property line.
No, it's just because when we were looking at 65 Church Street application, we were very clear about the security of keeping that back door closed so people would not have access to the indoor garage. That was really the intent of my question, to make sure that that is still true.
Understood.
I had a question about water drainage. Where, both in an open and closed scenario, how and where does the water drain?
I think that question, Mr. Broda, can be answered by our next witness who prepared the site plan and is prepared to discuss it.
Perfect.
Mr. Trembulak, I have a question. I just want to be clear. There is no egress from the rear of the restaurant to any location behind the building. Is that correct?
I believe so, but I think I would ask Mr. Mueller to confirm that.
Yeah. There was no egress on the back when we filed the application initially, and then I think that's why it was filed and accepted. Egress was on the front.
Okay, thank you.
There's two door. There's actually 3 door or 4 door exiting the restaurant itself, and all lead to a very wide main entrance of the restaurant, and that's the egress of the restaurant.
Mr. Tremulak, is your next witness going to address the zoning considerations also?
I mean, the variance?
Yeah,
Yeah, yes.
okay. I will hold off on my question, see whether it gets answered in his testimony. Any other questions from the board? If not, then I'll open it up to the public. And Janice, can you see if there's anyone showing up that would like to ask a question about the application, about what this witness testified?
Yes, I have, we have Hong Ang Lee. I've unmuted you. I don't know if you have your audio turned on. It does not appear that you have your audio turned on, but I have unmuted you and this is your opportunity to ask a question. If you can't ask the question, if you can't get your audio to work, you can type your question into the chat box or send me an email. Okay, I don't hear anything. So I'm going to go back to mute.
All right, well, we'll carry on then and see if, keep an eye out and see if anything shows up in the chat. Mr. Tremulak, your next witness.
Yes, Mark Best, please.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Do I need to be sworn in at this point?
Yes, Mr. Best, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very good. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Certainly. My full name is Mark, M-A-R-K, last name Bess, B-E-S-S. I'm the principal owner of MBA Architects, located at 115 Park Street in Montclair, New Jersey.
Okay. Mr. Best, what is your occupation?
I'm an architect, registered, licensed in New Jersey for, I would say, at least 25 years.
Okay. And can you just provide briefly your educational background?
Certainly. I attended undergraduate at Rutgers. I went to Pratt Institute School of Architecture, graduated late 1980s. Sorry, I don't remember the exact year. I currently, in addition to serving at MBA Architects, I'm a faculty member at MGIT, Hillier College of Architecture for the last 15 years. I also have a Master's of Architecture degree, and my license is current in the state of New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I'd offer Mr. Best as a expert in the field of architecture.
We'll accept him.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Best, did your office prepare the site plan that's been submitted in connection with this application?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And you're prepared to review that plan this evening?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And I believe your office also prepared an exhibit to assist with your presentation this evening?
That's correct. I would like to be able to share my screen if possible. Okay, well, this is it. It looks like you have it here.
Yeah, I can't share my screen, Mr. Best, but I can, if you tell me when to switch slides, I'll
Okay.
switch to the next slide.
All right, great. Let me move your screen over to mine. Okay, there we go.
Before we begin, I guess we should mark this as an exhibit. I guess would be A1.
Actually, I've actually pre-marked the exhibits. I did not
Oh.
read them into the record. So A1 is the application. A2 is the certification of taxes paid. A3 is the certification of publication. A4 is the affidavit of service. A5 is the site plan prepared by Green Stories LLC, dated April 7th, 2021. A6 is the report from the Historic Preservation Commission, dated April 15th, 2021. And A7 is the planning report dated April 16th, 2021. So this PowerPoint presentation will be A8.
All right. Well, thank you very much, commissioners. I appreciate your time this evening to review this application. As mentioned earlier, the application involves the erection and construction of a retractable glass structure. As Mr. Tremulak articulated, the structure includes the three walls, front, rear, and side, in addition to the roof structure itself, as you can see on this rendering before you. Dennis, can you flip to the next page, please? This is the existing survey, and you can see the restaurant on the left-hand rectangular area, the outdoor dining courtyard, lot 14. To the rear, there is you can see the property line, and there's a wall that runs along the rear of the property line. And there's also a wall that runs from the rear all the way down to the front of the building at Bloomfield Avenue. And so the intention is to enclose this area with this new structure. If you go to the next slide, the next slide shows a plan, the proposed plan. Excuse me. And what we have on the proposed plan is you'll see Bloomfield Avenue to the right. And when you enter, there's a pair of doors to enter into the space. This area is approximately 2,880 square feet that will be enclosed. What we've shown on this particular site plan are the columns, the structural columns. They're in metric equivalents, but they are approximately 4 inches by 6 inches each. They're spaced about 1 foot away from the existing building. And then at the far right of the screen, you'll see the wall that we were discussing before. And then so all the way to the left, I'm sorry, as well, you see the other wall, the back wall. So the structure will sit on the left wall, and the columns will support a structural beam that will carry the loads on the, I guess that's the bank. There's a bank building at the top of the page. At the bottom of the page is our restaurant, and the structure will be anchored to the wall and to portions of the roof of the existing restaurant. I know there was a question about loads. This has been engineered structurally to support snow loads that are based on the anticipated snow loads per the New Jersey building code, the IBC. Right now, there's, as far as this plan goes, there's no changes to the plan whatsoever. Everything that's currently there right now will remain. There's no additional lighting, for example. There's nothing new that's going on in this area. So other than the columns and the glass structure itself. Let's go to the next slide. So this shows the elevation of looking from Bloomfield Avenue at the structure. In the top image, it appears what one would see when the structure is a completely closed position. The bottom image shows what it would look like in the open position. And as you can see in the bottom image, the top row of glass are fixed panels. The second row comes down, much like a double hung window would come down, and over the door, they nestle behind the fixed panels above the door. To the right of the door, the panels continue down, and they are hidden behind the wall, which is at grade. So they kind of stack behind each other. That's the way that this system works. Each glass panel slides behind the following panel, and that panel slides behind the next panel, and then is hidden behind that wall. So the purple colors remain in place, and the non-purple colors will be allowed for air to flow through. That's how the system operates. At the high side, which is against the building, is where we're at about 19 and change in terms of height. And at the low side, we're at a little over 16 feet in height. So we have positive drainage across that roof surface. If we can go to the next one, this is a rendering that we took from the manufacturer's catalog, just to kind of illustrate what we're looking at here. Clearly, the panes in this image are much larger than what we are anticipating or what we are going to design. But this is just to give you a sense of how this operates. And you can see on the right-hand side, one of the panes is starting to come down. And you can see how it goes behind the one below it. That's how the system functions. And the ones on the top, at the top of this image, are fixed in place. Again, these don't represent the exact sizes of what we are proposing, but we wanted to show this to the committee, to the commission, so that you can get kind of a visual sense of what we're looking at here. Clearly, Faubourg has a wall that comes up behind the seating, and again, the glass sizes in this image are exaggerated and are somewhat larger than what we are proposing. In terms of the glass itself, it's insulated glass. It's all going to be clear, so there won't be any tint or any other type of coloration to it. The framing for the glass panes is aluminum, and it'll have this black matte finish. If you go to the next slide, we included this slide to illustrate this was during the construction of the restaurant itself, which we also presented earlier on before the restaurant opened. But we included this just to give you a sense of the color of the metal that we're proposing. It's a matte black finish, and it corresponds with the other metal that's already at the restaurant now. So we're not proposing anything different than what's already at the building, and we want to be consistent with that appearance. if you go to the next image, you'll see just kind of a close-up of this kind of framing. This is what we showed in the opening slide. And the intention here is that it becomes as transparent as possible, so that it doesn't feel as though it's competing with or imposing on the architecture that's there. People driving by and walking by will have a clear view into and out, and those inside can have a clear view out of the space. If we go to the next slide, I'll describe the roof. So similar to the side elevation, this one has the roof plan. On the left side, you'll see what it would look like in the closed position. And on the right side, just like the walls, each of the roof panels retract back towards the building and nestle under a series of fixed panels, just in the same manner that the walls move. So we feel that this gives the owner the option to have a completely, almost entirely open roof plane, and for the most part, the walls as well. It also allows the owner to utilize the fire pit when it's in the open position without having any issues with smoke or anything else that might cause any problems. You can see the fire pit in the circular element toward the center is completely open. So we feel very comfortable with that type of design. If you move to the next slide, and I think I even included a detail, but this section, this is a section through the entire assembly, and we're a foot off the building. I know there was some concern about not only the snow, but how water would make its way off of this structure because we have heavy rains. And what's nice about this is that each of the roof panels overlap the preceding or sequential roof panel starting from the high to the low. So water won't have an opportunity to get between the panels. It'll flow across the screen into a gutter. And this gutter system allows the water to travel along the gutter and down selected column locations and into the stormwater drainage system that's in existence, that's underground right now as we speak. There's a motor at the top of the existing parapet wall. And I have included in this presentation kind of a close-up detail on the next slide, which hopefully will explain how the water guttering and the system gets fastened to the building. So can we go to the next one? And hopefully this will clarify things a little bit. On the left-hand side, we have how we're going to fasten to the parapet wall. There's bolts and angles, structural angles that will go through the parapet wall to the back side. And then there's a steel bracing pipe that gets fastened from the parapet wall to the roof of the existing restaurant, holding and securing everything in place. On the right side, you can see how the gutter system works. The panels are sitting on this aluminum channel support with a steel beam. And at the very end, there's a aluminum gutter where the water will flow into. And then it runs, if we're looking at the screen, it will run towards us or away from us, and then drain down through one of the steel columns or a couple of the steel columns, and then again down into the stormwater drainage system. And the last image, what we did was we took a field shot and tried to superimpose the framing system over the existing restaurant to try to give you a pretty clear visual image of what you would see. Again, this image was done a little bit earlier in the construction, so there's some elements here that were, that show the plantings are now fully bloomed, for example. But the point is that it's solid glass in the back that you were concerned about a moment ago. There is no door or anything like that. It's all glass enclosed. And you'll see on the right-hand side the columns coming up. You could see the wall behind it, and we just tried to visualize this as to our best ability using different technologies to give you this kind of image. So that is my presentation. That's my kind of overview of how this system works. It's been installed in many different locations. It's a custom system for this project. It's being shipped from overseas, and that's and it's got a proven history of strong functionality. And we really believe that this will give the client the opportunity to have some seating and get some folks sitting out here during inclement weather, and of course during our post-COVID time frame where distancing and social distancing is important, allows them to have a little bit more functionality with the restaurant. So thank you very much, and I'm concluded with my testimony for this part.
Okay, I have a few follow-up questions, Mr. Best. Thank you for that presentation. I want to talk about the rear property line and the location of the enclosure in the rear. You're proposing to construct this on top of a retaining wall to be erected on the rear or just inside the rear property line. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
There would be no setback provided.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, is there any setback provided with respect to the restaurant building, or is that also located right against the rear property line?
The restaurant is located right up against the rear property line. It's consistent with the adjacent building. Yes, sir.
And what about the building to the east of the courtyard? Does that also have a 0-foot setback?
Yes, it is.
So you're proposing to align the rear of the enclosure so that it's in line with the rear of each building on the two sides of the enclosure?
That's correct.
And in order to cover the entire courtyard, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And are you familiar with the property located to the rear of the courtyard?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that's currently the parking lot on Church Street, is that right?
That's correct.
And are you aware of what's been approved for construction on that site?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's a multi-story building, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. In your opinion, would there be any negative detriment to any of the adjoining properties by virtue of the board granting a variance to permit the glass enclosure to extend to the property line with no setback?
No, I don't see any negative impact whatsoever, given the fact that at the rear a multi-story building will be erected. Absolutely not.
Okay, then that will block the view of the enclosure from any other properties to the rear?
Yes, it will.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that's all I have,
Also,
Mr. Chairman.
it also provides a little bit of additional shading from the south exposure.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Questions from the board?
Yes, Tony, I got a couple quick questions. So on the back side, the plans that we got show this, and Paul might have asked this already. They show a stairwell and a ramp or something. I don't really see on the plans that we got. I don't see where this retaining wall is. Can you point that out on the? Oh, there it is. There. The travelers wall on retaining wall. Okay. So we should ignore, there's stairs and stuff that I see on the plans that we got. Just ignore that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that all goes away.
Yeah,
Right.
there's stairs also on the other property, which I understand will be taken out.
Okay, got it. All right. And then, let's see, on the west side, you actually don't touch the building next door, right? So there's about a 1 foot separation?
Yeah, there's a 14-inch separation.
Okay, so that's kind of open to the air, right? The air just kind of circulates?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then I guess you've worked this out with your neighbor. I guess your neighbor will have to continue to maintain their wall, and you got some kind of arrangement or easement or something to allow them to maintain their building?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
To follow up on Tony's point there, the space that you're talking about that separates the new retractable gizmo from the neighbor's wall, how do you clean that? Are you able to clean debris that if it falls in that space?
So there's glass panes that are removable that allow for periodic cleaning.
But the glass panes, do they go all the way down? And is the bottom part removable so that you could get at that little alleyway and clean it up?
I don't think there's any glass panes against the building. The glass panes, I think, are only on the roof and then the north and south sides. I think that masonry wall is just going to be exposed, I think.
Well, explain, is it or isn't it? Is that just, there are columns there, right? And then there's just exposed masonry wall and a little gully between the two properties? Is that correct?
There's a, what I'd like to do, I want to get to, let's take a look here. So there's, hold on 1 second, I just want to pull up my other detail here. Tom?
Yeah.
Can you chime in a little bit?
Yeah. So
Tom has the actual construction details on his screen.
Right, we should probably have him sworn before he testifies.
Yeah, it took me a moment to unmute myself. Mr. Reynolds, can you see me, sir?
I can.
Would you please raise your right hand?
Yep.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Thomas Reynolds. We're actually been working with Mark on this project. My business is Green Stories LLC. I've been working very closely with Mark Bess on this project. Now, sorry, which you got?
Mr. Chairman, well, Mr. Tremblak, is Mr. Reynolds testifying as an engineer, as a architect, or any kind of expert, or?
For this designer, working with Mark on this system and sort of coordinating with the construction.
Yeah, Tom has worked very closely with the manufacturer and has the manufacturer's details. He can explain exactly what's going on against the back wall.
Yeah. So I think the question was about the small distance between the what would be our retaining wall and the retaining wall that was required as part of the approval of the Church Street property. Is that correct?
The wall against the neighboring building.
Yeah, my question is.
The bank.
So on the right side, what we see currently.
Yes.
Okay. So if you see the top, sort of the very top right there, that's the main structure carrying the roof and the gutter system. And then there's another horizontal sort of, looks like a set of tubes that aligns with sort of the higher part of the neighbors. Their parapet wall steps down towards the middle. There is a piece of glass between that top structure and that set of tubes. That piece of glass is the one that's removable so that our property can maintain that. So that is also set away from the neighboring property, giving us, so if one wanted to, they can put up a window cleaning squeegee behind it or take it off and actually clean it, give it a more thorough cleaning. And it aligns with the highest point of the neighbor's parapet wall. So for a predominant part of it, it is open. So if anything was to potentially get stuck, it would be in the front and back, and anywhere else it would just fall behind. And the fact that we are sort of center a foot away from that building, it would have to be a pretty large piece of debris to get stuck there.
Did that answer your question, Carmel?
I guess so.
Is the wall to that building, the wall to that building is exposed at all times? There's no glass panels that cover it, correctly?
Correct.
Yeah.
So the only thing that will be immediately adjacent to the wall will be the cylinders, the aluminum cylinders that run vertically from the ground to the top of the structure.
And those are set a foot apart, so they're from that wall, so there's still room for stuff that, anything that could potentially get stuck to come down.
So I guess the question is, if you're sitting in the outdoor area, you could theoretically, you could walk into the planted area, and you could stick your hand and touch the wall of the bank next to you.
Okay, and there's no little gully or whatever. They're flush. The floor of your property is flush with that bank wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
No
Correct.
problem.
It's a planted area. It's planted for the most part. There's greenery there.
Okay. Got it.
I'm a little confused. So if I look at the picture right there, it looks like it's going to be higher than the neighboring building. But when I look at the facade on the drawing set, it's lower than the neighboring building. So is the roof of this thing higher or lower than? See right there, the top photo looks like it's lower, but then.
So I think the easiest way to understand it, if you go back to that same rendering that we were just looking at, so the Thalberg building, you see how the front facade is about 2 feet taller. It's very similar for the Investors Bank building. Their front parapet is about 2 feet taller than the side parapet.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, there's another picture that shows it. It's so the top of this roof is actually slightly lower than both adjoining buildings. Okay, got it.
The Investors Bank top starts high, and then it has a cut in it.
Okay.
And then it gets lower, and then it comes back up, and then it goes across. It's like a zigzag. It's not uniform all the way across.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm all set. Thanks.
So where are the emergency exits when the windows are up?
When the windows are, say that again, I'm sorry.
When the panels are up,
yes,
blocking the front and the back, where are the emergency exits in case something happens?
If there's an emergency, you would go through the pair of double doors at the Bloomfield Avenue side.
So that's those are the only exits and entrance to that enclosed building area.
Yes.
And
as it is right now, actually, because it's like kind of secured like that now.
And does that meet code?
Yes, it does. Because we didn't change our occupancy at all. So we always had to.
And could you clarify that, since you brought it up, the occupancy?
Yeah, the occupancy hasn't changed from the initial permit application that was granted by the township of Montclair. We haven't changed occupancy, so.
But because there is a building covering this, area now, does that change anything with respect to the impact of that seating that's out there?
No, no, it doesn't. We always had to accommodate for that regardless. So when somebody would enter and wants to sit outside, if there was some type of emergency, they would leave. Currently, they would leave the same way that they would leave with the enclosure. There's
Well,
no impact.
that I understand, but there's a lot more leeway because you don't have glass panels in the front blocking your exit if you can't get through that door, and you don't have panels blocking your exit in the back or a building up against the back of an enclosed space now. So the dynamics of it are a little bit different. Again, you've got a building and not an open courtyard now. But that doesn't have any impact on the zoning requirements, Janice and Art?
Well, this is considered a new building.
Right.
So, because
So-
even if the seating was already there, it wasn't considered part of a building because it was outdoor seating.
That's
So
what.
yes, the zoning does now apply.
And what about parking? Isn't, because it's a new building, even though it's in the C1 zone, it's an expansion beyond a certain amount. So doesn't that impact parking also?
As long as it's an expansion beyond, I don't know, they can expand the building up to 15% in terms of floor area without triggering parking.
But this is more than 15%, isn't it?
I don't know offhand. What's the
I mean,
square?
I'm just looking at the size. If you look at the aerial view of the drawings that you've got next to you, it looks more like 30%.
Yeah, you're
know.
probably right. You're probably right. Did you calculate the percentage increase in floor area created by this addition?
No, I don't. I didn't calculate it. No, I did not calculate it.
I think it's safe to say that because this is now part of the building, there is a parking requirement, and now you'd have to address a parking variance as well for the seating that's in the building.
Well,
Yeah, and I'm just, and I'm concerned about the safety factor because there's only that one exit door when those glass panels are down. Are those panels electrically operated? Or are they
Yes.
manual? So if the power goes out, if there's a fire in the front of that area for some reason, I don't know, the people are effectively trapped.
Well, people would egress through the restaurant like they would if it was open air. I mean, you're within the travel.
There is a way to get out. There is a way to get out in the back. And where?
Oh, there's a
can you
way
point that
to.
out?
I'm sorry, I didn't. There's not a way. When you say the back, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
I'm thinking. Well, I'm sorry. I'm thinking that there's. When I say the back too, I'm probably not being as precise with my language as I should. There's a way to get into the restaurant through the side of the building.
That's correct.
That could be used as an exit. Where does it, or is that, and that entrance or that pass through, where is that?
Tom, can you pull that up, please?
I'm trying to think if we have that in this set.
We have a door, right? Well, if you go back to, I'm sorry, or can you show where it would be from that drawing? Where it says existing bar and seating? I
Yeah.
know there's a door.
Okay, but that's right in the front of the area, correct?
So there's 3 doors along that facade. There's one toward the front that the restaurant typically keeps closed. There's one just past the bar seating area. That's the one that most people enter through. And then, so I guess the next 2 are sort of at different elevations. One's at the bottom of that set of stairs. And then there's another one sort of going up onto the raised seating area. And then I think so your main concern is that when this thing is closed, if there's some emergency, that at the main entry of Bloomfield Avenue, there's a lack of,
Yeah, how do people get out? How do people get out if there's a fire in the restaurant? Does that mean that everybody has to go through those front doors? And if something happens,
No, there's,
just trying to understand in light of,
if there was a, let's say that something catastrophic happened within the greenhouse space itself, then people would, there's several doors that lead into the restaurant and out.
but are those doors normally open and unlocked?
Yes, they are, as long as the restaurant is open and functioning.
And
If they're not, if they're not open and locked, then nobody is in the patio area. The
Right.
owner would have closed it off.
Yeah, sure, understood. So
Because
Janice,
if someone's in the patio and they want to use the toilet, for example, they can easily go into the restaurant, use the toilet, and come back out. It would be the same situation.
Janice, does the building department, when they're issuing the permits for this, will they evaluate the safety issue and egress and exits and stuff?
Yes, most certainly they will.
So we don't have to really be concerned about making sure that all of that works correctly, correct?
That's a building code requirement.
Okay, so we'll let the building department worry about that. At least there's some options, and that's what I was trying to see, whether there were some options. So going back now to the seating and parking and the variances, because this is a building, and it's, at least that's the way that it was presented to us. I was trying to understand how that impacted parking requirements, and also seating requirements, because the seating requirement is not based on a building necessarily on how you have the seating set up. It's based on the actual square footage, right, Janice, of usable floor space, correct?
What do you mean by the seating requirement? It's based.
Seating capacity, how
Oh.
seating capacity is determined. It's not determined by the areas that you have set up for seating so much as it's determined by the square footage, right?
Well, in terms of parking, it's determined by the number of seats.
By the number of seats actually provided.
Yeah, because we don't have a
Okay.
capacity
Gotcha.
through zoning. So the question I have is, how many seats are in the patio area?
I think Olivier might be able to maybe answer that question.
I think it's around 80, as we initially filed the application when we opened the restaurant, and then we have not changed it since we opened I understand the changes on the roof structure, but the restaurant functionalities are changed, and even less so, because when we talk about 80 seats, never all chairs are utilized, especially now with COVID. There's space in between tables. There's been table removed, so I think I'm just saying that up my head.
Right, I'm not talking about during COVID, but how many seats at your maximum capacity is what we really want to know as part of this application.
I think it's 80. It's around outside.
Okay.
If I could just make a comment, I mean, whatever seating is there, it's there today. We're not increasing any seating capacity in the courtyard. We're not changing anything except putting an enclosure there for colder, or more inclement weather.
That's understood, Mr. Tremulat. But the question is, though, because it's a new building now, which it wasn't before, does that trigger different requirements under under our zoning ordinances?
Well, we weren't cited for a parking variance by the planning department, and we're certainly not prepared to provide any proof to support a parking variance. And candidly, we can't. I mean, we don't have any alternative. The people who go to the restaurant today park wherever they park. We're
Right.
not we're not adding to the parking demand. We're not
Understood,
increasing the
Mr.
seating
Tremblay,
capacity.
but
Yes,
also
it's
you
a
must take into
structure.
consideration that this is going to be now set up for a year-round operation. And we understand the situation with respect to COVID and how we're trying to adapt for that. And hey, this is a great adaptation. I don't criticize it for that. And I know it's not your intent to increase the capacity here. You're trying to accommodate your basically your clientele, your current clientele. However, I think we have to pay attention to the particulars and the specifics of our zoning ordinances so that if we're going to provide you with any sort of relief, that we're providing you the full and proper relief and we're not overlooking something.
Okay, I
So
understand.
I'm gonna,
Certainly. All I can say is that if the board determines that we need a parking variance because of this enclosure, then I'm going to amend the application and request that the board grant that variance as part of the relief.
so I'm going to speak my first words as a newly sworn and unoriented member. And so if I'm out of turn or if I'm wrong, forgive me in advance. But Mr. Chairman, what we have here is a crown jewel restaurant in Montclair that is coming to us to try to find a way, both within COVID and post-COVID, to succeed. And it can't be. I mean, I would need to have legal advice from our counsel on this, and I would need to see a reason why suddenly throwing up a glass wall in the front and the roof suddenly turns what an existing seating area, which he's utilizing year round anyway, how that can have an impact on the parking requirement. If it is,
Well,
it is.
Mr. Jacobson, I appreciate what you're saying, but you really have to read the planning department's memo on this. It indicates in that memo why this is now considered a building, and our zoning ordinances, which have been passed by the council, set up certain requirements, and so that's why I'm bringing this up, so that we don't bypass any of the necessities that we have to consider in deciding upon this application, because our application, our determination here as a quasi-judicial body is to make a decision based on the law that's applicable and not necessarily solely on equities and other non-legal considerations, because that is what we are charged with under the municipal land use law. So and I'm not saying that I disagree with anything that you've said, but I'm just saying that if there's a parking requirement here, we have to consider that and we have to deal with that one way or the other. Otherwise, applicants coming after this are going to say, well, this person built and you didn't do that, and why are you now asking us to do it?
It's not discussing the
Just pulling this
equities.
out of the air.
I was not discussing the equities. I was discussing the law, because what I understood from both the owner and from Ms. Talley is that this is not changing the occupancy or the seating in any way. And so to the extent that the parking is based on the number of seats in the restaurant, it's not changing. So that's why I just need to hear why the fact that yes, I recognize that it's becoming a building, but I don't see yet the connection to the parking requirement.
Janice?
Because our parking requirement in the downtown is triggered by new construction of a building. The use of, we do not apply the parking requirement to outdoor seating. We generally don't, because that's seasonal. But when you create a building, it's a permanent structure, and as a permanent structure, the parking applies. So it's, in this instance, it's a technicality. The seating's already there. But because it's now inside a building, that triggers the need for a parking variance. So that's where we are.
And my only point is that we can't ignore that. We have to deal with that.
I believe you had mentioned that it's triggered by the increase of floor area And I know you made the assumption that it was the 30-something%, but we also do have the full basement down there, which, so the question comes to what is the limitation there? Because if it's 30%, this increase is less than 30, it is more than 20.
No, Thomas, it's 15%, so
15%,
it's,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, 15% is the magic number. If it goes over 15%, then it triggers the parking requirements.
Chairman,
Yes.
just building on Mr. Jacobson's point, though, yeah, I'm very sympathetic to the points that Mr. Jacobson raises. And so you're positing that, yes, we can make those considerations, but it still needs to come back for a parking variance, and then we can have a conversation on how the space was used and, you know, the role of this institution within our, you know, community as a planning consideration for potential granting of a variance, but not that we can prevent the process of going through them actually requesting a variance. Is that kind of what
Right,
you're saying here, Chairman?
The way that I understand it and what I'm seeing, it sounds like we have to consider granting or not granting them a variance for parking based on what's currently before us. And we'll have to put that on the record. We just can't ignore it.
May I ask what is the code section that is being referred to?
You'll have to give me a moment to pull it up.
Thanks.
Mr. Nguyen, can we make that decision now, or do they have to go back and amend their application?
Well, I think at the very least, you know, the application has to be amended, but I believe it can be amended verbally at this point. Although I'm not sure, Art, doesn't that trigger another notice issue?
I haven't seen Mr. Trembulak's notice, but generally speaking, I would think that Mr. Trembulak, being who he is, put in the catch-all provision into his notice. Can you verify that, Mr. Trembulak?
Yes, I'm looking at the notice, Mr. Neese, and we included the typical catch-all language requesting, quote, any other variances, waivers, or exceptions that may be required in connection with this application. So I think that satisfies the notice requirement. And as I said earlier, we will amend our application to request a parking variance if the board determines that such a variance is necessary.
So we don't need them to refile for that.
No.
We don't need to. I don't think we need to refile. And candidly, there's no additional testimony I could provide to deal with the parking variance. There's no parking on this site now. Obviously, whatever public parking is available now. And you know, there's nothing I can offer to justify the parking variance, and all I would do is repeat what we've already said, which is, oh yes, technically this is a variance because we are now enclosing existing seating with a enclosure which qualifies as a structure, which then makes this now a building, and technically it possibly triggers a parking requirement under section 347-101. However, as a practical matter, we're not increasing the seating capacity by 1 seat. We're just providing cover and enclosure for the existing seating area. So.
Understood. How many parking spaces, additional parking spaces, with the given stated seating for this area would we be talking?
If I may add, I have on the screen the parking requirement where it says in the C1 and C3 zones, additions of less than 15% of the existing building's total square footage, which do not reduce the number of off-street parking spaces that serve the property, is permitted. But if it's more than 15%, that triggers the parking requirement. So if we can get the square footage of the existing building and calculate what 15% of that is, and then calculate what the square footage of the area within the new building, we can figure out what the parking requirement is.
Does that include basement area, Janice, that we talk about the square footage for the building?
I think it's habitable area in the basement, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would include the basement.
It might be close to that 15% then.
Right.
I don't know how big the basement is, though.
So
Is it
the
the full area of the building?
The total interior area is 12,675, and the outdoor area is 2,880.
And that 12,000 figure, that includes the
Basement,
basement?
the second floor, yeah,
All habitable areas.
all habitable areas, correct?
So it's 22% of the existing habitable area. So it does trigger a parking variance.
Mhm.
Does trigger a
If
parking
you scroll down, what does the ordinance say about about restaurants? I only see banks up to banks.
The requirement is 1 space per every 3 seats plus 1 per 2 seats in a lounge or bar area. So if it's 12,675, let me get,
Seating is, because the bar, was the bar considered outdoor seating already, or was the bar considered a permanent, the outside bar area? Was that already covered in the existing parking requirement?
no.
Okay.
Okay, so it's, you can expand up to 1,901 square feet before you trigger a parking variance. So if your addition is 2,880, it's 979 square feet. That's attributable to the additional parking requirement, but how you divvy up the spaces within that 979 square feet, it's not clear in the way our ordinance is
much is
drafted right now.
So you're saying that the parking requirement gets calculated on that 900 plus square feet?
Right.
So what's the square footage of the landscaped area, the fire pit? How much does that take up in the area? Because there's a lot of decorative space. I won't call it dead space, but there's a lot of decorative space where there's no actual eating going on.
That's correct.
Right.
So can you come up with a number for that space? Looking at your plans?
I think wall is at least 3 foot all the way, the 100 foot long by 3 or 4 foot, then is not unused, plus the fire pit. So
I think perhaps maybe we could approach this as saying that a parking variance is required because of the expansion of the restaurant. And because you can't divvy it up, if we could limit it to the 80 feet that's in existence right now, and that would in effect preserve the open space that's part of the plan as it is. Maybe that's one way to address it.
644 square feet is sort of unusable landscape. Actually, there's more because there's additional interior.
So that only leaves about 300 and change, right? For additional possible parking.
If you give me a second, because there's 2 other landscape areas I just want to make sure we capture.
Take all the time you need.
35 there, and another 36. So another 71 square feet over.
I'm sorry, that number was?
So there's a 644 and 71.
So that's 7 something.
Yeah, 715 of unusable.
plus the stairwells, all the stairwells included.
Oh man, there are a lot of stairwells.
And perhaps we say no expansion of the mezzanine or upper level eating areas in the open space.
That's fair.
Because there would be a minimal increase in parking that would be required, minimum spaces for the couple of 100 square feet that we're talking about.
Right.
If I may say that, I think in the 2 years of history of the restaurant, I think there's been no reasons in the, I think more than 50% of people using Uber. And then, I mean, I think the municipality can attest, the police of Montclair, there's never been an incident in front of our restaurant, and we don't have valet, there's never congestion in any source.
So if we wanted to consider a parking variance, the elements that we're talking about are minimal actual usable space that would require a minimum increase, potential increase in parking, a commitment by the applicant not to increase usage in the new building area or in any of the other areas in the restaurant, basically preserving the status quo with respect to seating.
May I ask a question, Chairman? Or Janice, maybe you know, is there a variance already for parking? Because this restaurant doesn't have any offsite parking, right?
Well, yeah, but we exempt, when you convert a building in the downtown to a use that requires more parking, they're
Yeah.
exempt from the parking requirement.
So
when this
I think
was-
we're
Only if you
looking
increase
at
the
chasing our tail here. I think that we're gonna let the lawyers work it out, whatever is necessary, but there's this restaurant has no offsite parking. It has an existing seating area that has no outside parking. They're just putting something up that protects the people eating from rain. So I just think we're making a big deal about it. I know that there's some technicalities and so forth, but it just doesn't.
Chairman, I'm glad he raised it because I see now from Janice's having pulled the statute up that we do have to deal with it. But I agree with you completely that we just ought to say whatever needs to happen here should happen because it's the right answer.
I'm going to ask for everybody, because we are getting a lot of feedback, everybody who's not speaking, if you can mute yourself so that we can improve the audio quality.
So I've gone through, removed all the unusable spaces, and that increase over the 15% is 91 square feet.
All right.
I want to make sure I have the numbers right, Tom. You have 644 square feet of landscaped area. Then you said there was another 300 square feet of landscaped area.
Yeah, so there's the two interior that wrap the staircases of another 300 square feet of landscape. Sort of the stairs to the basement, these stairs leading up to the raised area, and I missed the planter on the east side of the door. When you add all those in, they come in, and some other sort of like the water feature, and you add all that in, it comes to another 117.5 square feet.
So what's the total of
So
unusable?
the total usable
or unusable?
Unusable is 888.5.
888 and a half. Okay.
Yes.
Thomas, if I might, there's also a lot of stations for waiters' furnitures and take space and no space for sitting. Bus station.
Yeah,
Those are somewhat movable, aren't they?
those are, yeah.
Yeah, so let's do the fixed unusable areas, and I think we have a number that Tom's testified to at 880 square feet and a half, and that's something that we can put in the resolution.
And then so that leaves us over the 15% at 90.25 square feet.
Okay.
What about the bar?
How did you get a quarter?
So the 15% of the total interior is 1901.25. And then,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
What about your bar area? Are you discounting that? Nobody
we
can sit
kept the
behind
bar
bars?
area in for this calculation. I also know that there's a different parking requirement for the bar area versus the,
Yeah, that's still a usable area. The bar is very usable.
quite.
You sound
No,
like someone with
in front of
experience.
the bar where they're sitting.
Certainly.
In front of the bar where they're sitting. I was talking about behind the bar where the bartender is.
That's,
At that point, you probably come down to 0.
so the behind the bar is 54.25 square feet.
Yeah. So it brings you down to 40 square feet. Okay.
The vestibule at the entrance of the restaurant is unusable, and then there's also, I guess is it part of the,
So honestly, I think all of this goes into all of this discussion goes into the justification for the parking variance and the limitation to the existing seating capacity within the patio. Because once you take out all the unusable area, I think you get down to no increase in parking required if you keep the seating at 80. Is that clear as glass to everybody?
I mean, if I were the
Understand
applicant,
it?
I mean, if there is a variance, just get the variance. If there's a building that's built, is there anything in the code that says what's usable of the building and what's not? I don't see that in the language. It just seems like there's so much fuss about, I mean, if a variance is needed, let's just grant the variance, and then if they put 10 more seats in, who cares? I don't want to make it.
I think, Tony, that goes to the justification for the variance. It's not.
Well, I don't know. I'm just lost.
Tony, is that the way we're going to handle? Is that the way we're going to handle all variants?
No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying in this particular instance, we're talking about the usability of a building area. I don't see usability of the thing. The
I think, Tony, we've already gotten to the point where we can justify the variance. So why don't we just move on?
May I complete my thought when I'm speaking, Chairman?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. We're talking about the percentage of usable area of the building area, and I don't see a reference to that in the code. I see a building size. I don't see any other granular definitions of whether you can do all these mathematical calculations. So I think we're chasing our tail a little bit with respect to this. That's all, and I'll leave it there.
All right. Well, the code speaks for itself. And Mr. Tremulak, well, first of all, with the witness that we've got up, are there any other questions from the board?
I have one other question, and it may be off the wall, but it strikes me that you have a fire pit, and the ideal time to use the fire pit is if you had the glass enclosure closed to make it warmer, and yet you can't do that because of the exhaust from the fire pit. Is there any way that you could have anything that would exhaust the fumes from the fire pit successfully installed while you had the glass enclosure closed?
we will stop using it. We only had it because it was an open air, obviously with enclosure.
It's not a feature that you'd like to keep and use in the wintertime and then have.
I don't think it will be in play anymore.
Okay.
Well, that would bring up my question, which is about air conditioning. Will the new space have air conditioning and heat?
Well, I think our intention is to make it as comfortable as possible, and then we're going into steps into but then initially it's we can't put a tent or any good retractable awning, and then this is a initial solution that we came up with, and then continue to work on maybe adding some fan, and then eventually down the road propose something.
Okay, thank you.
And just one more question to follow on Chairman Nguyen's point earlier. So the glass in the rear of the enclosure, that does not open. Is that correct? It's fixed? So you can't open a window back there, or if you can, it's electrified. Is that true? Or how does that work?
All of the walls retract.
Okay, even the ones in the back. So if there were
Yes.
an emergency, someone could open the window and get out the window, or no?
Yeah, it retract on the back.
I didn't catch that.
It's a retractable. The windows can be opened.
So they could be open. So when we were discussing fire safety, wouldn't that be a solution, is that you can just open the window and go out, climb out the window in an emergency? No?
That would be a potential, yeah, to be able to open that up and go out there. Yeah.
Yes.
Open without electrical?
Well, all of these have an emergency ability to open if there is a power situation.
Okay, so that's your answer, that there's a small retaining wall, there's glass, and that glass could be opened if there were an emergency, and people could go out into that back alley.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry, I missed what you said about the electric. If the electric goes out, what happens?
There's an emergency. There's a way to move the panels without the electric. The electric is sort of controlling the motor. There's an emergency, almost like a double hung window has a way to open them up, but you still operate it and up and down. This has an emergency thing so that if the power is out and you need to open it, you can. A manual override will say.
Must it be cranked, or it simply falls by gravity?
Individual channel.
So each panel can be, there's some clip or some mechanism that one can push or somehow maneuver to cause the
More for
ping.
the opening, but yeah, because if you were to try to close it, you'd have to get to the height of it to be able to, which is
Right. And if you use that manual override, as you call it, does the window fall because there's no torsion on it? How does that work?
So now they will. I'm going to clarify. This company is a Turkish company. My understanding of it is that you should be able to move, and it'll still lock into the system itself, but you can move it as necessary.
Uh,
I'm trying to see if I've got a detail of.
Well, I think the building department will take care of.
And I think you're correct.
So I don't think it's something that we have to explore in depth. There are options as to whether that is a workable option or whether some of the other egresses are workable. We'll let our building department and our inspectors, fire inspectors, deal with that. Are there any other questions from the board?
And just from my perspective, Mr. Chairman, are we going to make that a condition if the board is approving this? Are we going to make those conditions? I mean, they're obligated to do that.
Do we need to make them conditions, or doesn't that happen automatically?
Oh, I think it generally will happen automatically, but if the board is concerned about it, that's the only reason I bring it up. Because
we could make it an explicit condition.
If we don't customarily opine on safety, I don't think we should start here.
We do opine on safety from time to time. It's not a cut and dry issue like that. But we allow the existing municipal agencies to act where they are supposed to be acting. And if it's something that, but our agencies don't cover every safety aspect that we're charged with covering as the planning board. So in this case, I think, though, that our building department and our fire safety officials are tasked to make sure that this new construction, is safe for the public to use. So as long as there's options for it, we'll let them decide whether or not those options are adequate.
It's effectively putting the building department on notice that this is a concern of the planning board.
And we have done that. We do that routinely. If we see something, we point it out. And I guess the building department addresses it then, but we certainly point it out to people.
Yeah.
We would be remiss if we didn't, if we saw something and didn't say something. From a safety point of view, we actually used to have the fire guy sitting in our meetings.
If I could add to that, I think it's one of the most important things that the building department will always look at in examining any structure or any permit application, and that being ingress and egress, particularly emergency egress. So I think that's something that's ordinarily going to be given a very close look by the building department, and the building codes and fire codes clearly address what's required, and we would expect that we will have to, comply with all of those codes, fire, safety, building codes, and we will.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that, Mr. Tremblay. The only thing I'm asking, the only reason I ask is whether or not the board wants to highlight the fact that this has been a topic of discussion and it is something that the board wants the building department to look into. That's it.
We have no problem with that. The board's not looking to superimpose or add any additional requirements, but just making sure, and that's fine.
Are there any further questions from the board of the witness with respect to his testimony? What about our member of the public? I believe we only have, well, actually, do we only have one, or is it more than one? I can't always read my participant screen correctly.
We have 3 members of the public. I've unmuted all of you.
Okay, great.
So if you have any questions, this is the time to ask them.
Okay, this is Frank Rabacki. Should I start? Hello?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Rabacki.
My question is, how many times has this patio area, I'll call it a patio area, this outdoor dining and drinking area, been revised since the original opening, the restaurant opening?
I think since the original opening, it's rather stayed the same. There's an addition of we'll call them the plexiglass screenings between the tables, but it's stayed generally the same since opening.
Okay, so the fire pit, the things that you guys were discussing before, have all been there for the duration since it's opened.
Correct.
Okay, and what is the rated occupancy of the patio area now? I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
Looking. So if you're going from the rated occupancy from the code, but if we had a specific number that we had filed when we put the permit application, and I'm trying to find that from 2018 for you.
But I assume the fire department came in and confirmed that, and you posted that, correct?
Correct.
So what you put on the permit is not what interests me. It's what the fire department allowed you to post is the number that interests me.
I believe the number they used was for the entire space, though, which both interior and exterior.
So we're adding a new building and we don't know the occupancy of the new building. Is that a fair characterization?
The occupancy, as it was originally filed, included both spaces. We're enclosing one space. The calculation for occupancy did not segregate the exterior from the interior.
I thought occupant, if it's open space, it's not part of a building. I mean, architectural or building permit, fire official, they're not calculating occupancy for an area that's
not for
outside of the
open
building.
space. So right now, the exercise that we just went through was to try to determine the net. When you look at the occupant load, it's either net or gross. For places of assembly, it's net. So we had to subtract out the unusable areas. The seating area for a bar has a lower occupant than stationary seating. It's a technicality. If you have movable chairs and fixed chairs, it's different. So it really requires a calculation, which we just kind of thumbnailed it when we were having our testimony here.
No,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Mr. Mueller indicated that the occupancy on of the outside area was approximately 80.
That's what he testified as what the seating is. I don't know if he calculated, he probably calculated the exact number of chairs and tables, or how many seats how many people he can accommodate.
That's because that's what we use for the parking calculation. It's the number of seats, which is different from the occupancy from the fire officials' standpoint.
Because they work off of the chapter 10 maximum floor area allowable, which assembly with unconcentrated chairs and tables. What puts us at? $130 if you're using that. Yeah.
So if you have a catered event, you could have 130 people in there?
Trying to check because we have some seating that is fixed and some that is not. I'm trying to figure out how to segregate those spaces right now.
You have to do a calculation. So.
Yeah, there's a bit more calculation to be done, but
based on the net square footages that we came up with, place of assembly is either 7 people per square foot. I'm working off of my memory now.
Or 15.
Or 15.
Yeah.
15 for standing area, 7 for seating. That's what we would have on our drawing that we would submit to the building department if considering this to be a new building.
But, okay, I don't understand. You're going to submit that to the building. There's a disconnect here in my mind, and I'm trying to understand. Is that you're going to submit one set of information to the building department. You're submitting a different set of information to the planning board, and the planning board is creating a new definition of net space, which they're not going to pass along to the building department. And we're going to establish a precedent that we came up with this new net space concept that we can apply to other bars and restaurants going forward. Is that a fair characterization?
so as I understand your question, it's a bit of a you're looking at different things. So the planning board is looking at the zoning ordinance and the master plan and that definition of what the space is. And sort of the question you asked looks at the building codes definition, because there's yet another one. So for the health department, they're going to want to know the number of seats that are actually there. So there's actually going to theoretically be 3 different numbers that are used. One for the planning board, which is coincidentally similar to the health departments because they're looking at the number of seats. And then the one for the building department where they're looking at the chapter 10 means of egress, maximum floor area allowance by occupancy. And they're looking at it purely at the existing the net area to the potential amount of people that could fit in there by this net area calculation in the building code. So I think the answer to your one question is yes, there is 2 different looks, but like, you know, in the back of this space, we have these banquette tables that sit maybe, you know, 4 people comfortably, 6 people tight, but that 6-person tight space counts as significantly more people in the maximum floor area calculation, but you're never going to have people there unless they're standing on top of each other or on the table. That makes sense.
Okay.
This is Tony. Can I try again at simplifying this if possible, and I'll be a little bit more deliberate? We're looking at parking for zoning, not occupancy related to safety. We don't regulate safety. So the only thing we have to worry about is what's the parking requirement for this. I think that's right. And for restaurants, it's 1 per 3 seats of regular space and 1 per 2 seats in lounge and bar areas. It has nothing to do with area. It's by the seat. And if the original permit counted the seats in both the outside and inside, all those seats have already been counted already. So I think it's moot. Now, the additional building factor.
Tony, that's fine. You can have that in the discussion section, but I'm asking some questions because I'm trying to understand this. So I appreciate you can have that with your peers when you get to the discussion section. What I understand, I'm having a hard time following, and I could some help from the board and the applicant, whoever, I don't care, is that on one hand, you're talking about parking. The other hand, you're talking about a requirement for a building requirement. And it's not clear to me where we have these safety issues. We have boards all the time look at safety issues. The zoning board looked at the Bellevue Theater in detail and had no problem challenging the applicant as far as safety issues because there were obvious ones. The planning board challenged Lackawanna for safety issues because of the height of the various things. The planning board has challenged the hotel and 37 Orange Road with safety issues. So you guys, my question is, I really don't care that much about this restaurant. I don't care. But what I do care about is understanding what you're making up here and what is based in existing ordinance or precedent. Or what new stuff are you making up here?
I think there may be a way through here that maybe we've created a confusion that we didn't mean to. As a new member, what I heard we were doing is we were trying to figure out whether the parking variance requirement is met. And there was a colloquy between Janice and the applicant where we concluded that yes, the parking requirement is in fact met. And then we had a separate discussion of, why is it met? And we had some creative conversations about the square footage for that purpose, where we found that there was really no way to find that the parking variance requirement is not met. But we find that it's met by a little, and that is going to be relevant to our consideration whether to grant the parking variance. But it has nothing to do with anything else. We're not making any exceptions. We're not making any findings with regard to usable space. We're just kind of thinking about why we want to do that which we want to do, which is grant a parking variance if it's necessary.
And Mr. Rabaki, Mr. Rabaki, with respect to the safety issue, you're right. We do question obvious safety issues. For me, the obvious safety issue that I saw was egress, emergency egress, which wasn't clear on the drawings where those egresses were. The applicant testified that there were several options, including doors into the restaurant. At that point, I determined in my mind that since there were options, then we could leave it up to our other municipal agencies to determine whether those options were sufficient. If there weren't any options, I think we might be having a different discussion about that. But there were options that could potentially provide adequate emergency exits. So that, to me, took it off of our plate, out of the realm of obvious.
Okay, but can I go back to, again, I don't care about the parking either. What I care about is that where I heard the conversation was you started netting down space from the 15% figure. That's what I heard, and that's where I got confused.
No, we didn't net down the 15% figure. We tried to find out the 15%. The only relevancy for the 15% figure was the fact of the floor space triggering parking requirements. And once we determined that the size of the addition was in excess of 15%, then our parking requirement got triggered. Then we had to consider a parking variance. Then we had to quantify exactly what that variance was. And so that's what we were undergoing the exercise to determine exactly how many spaces, if there was a parking requirement here, and if we were right in that assumption, then how many spaces are we talking about that would be needed in order for this applicant not to have to require a variance. And that way we can determine exactly if we have to grant a variance, we could determine the impact of that variance, the scope of that variance, exactly how many parking spaces we were allowing the applicant not to provide, which is the net impact of granting the variance. So that's what that whole line of conversation was. It wasn't changing the 15%, it wasn't netting it down. It was trying to find out exactly what was the usable space in the current seating situation, because there was also, alongside of that, consideration of if we require the applicant as a condition of the variance to maintain the current seating situation, what would then be the impact of the variance?
Okay, so I think so. I would like to wrap this up because I think I've made my point as far as it's a little confusing. But so you're calculating the parking based on net space. You kind of netted it down so that parking requirement is netted down.
We figured out usable space above the 15%. That would require the parking variance. If we kept the same configuration, and you see on that picture that is on the screen now, there's a number of spaces that are fixed with either landscaping or a fire pit or banquette stairs. If we keep this configuration, exactly what would the parking requirement be? And that would be the difference that would be calculated based on the increase in usable space above the 15%.
Okay, and this is not new territory. We're not establishing precedent. You've done this before.
We're just applying the statute. I'm sorry, the regular. Yeah, we're just applying the municipal ordinance regulation. We're not creating anything.
Okay, and so the expectation is you would make a stipulation that the fire pit has to stay, it can be converted into seating in the spring or the summer or something like that, correct?
I think that would have to be part of any variance that we created. That's my opinion. I don't speak for the entire board. Everybody's entitled to their opinion on the board, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Any other questions from the public? Nothing, Janice?
Nothing.
All right, well then, I believe Mr. Tremulek has another witness.
No, that completes our,
You done?
completes our case, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
No further witnesses.
All right, then let's open the floor up to the public if anybody wants to make a general comment about the application.
Okay, public, you are unmuted. So if anybody has any comments about this application, now is the time. I don't know if you have your audio on, but you can always send me a message in chat or an email. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything.
Okay. All right, then it doesn't appear that there's any public comment on this. Mr. Tremulek, do you want to make a closing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Briefly, and I really want to address the two variances, although I think we've talked enough about the parking variance. But before I even address those, I think Mr. Jacobson hit the nail on the head in referring to this restaurant as a crown jewel among many great restaurants in the town of Montclair. It's really become one of the top restaurants, in my view, in the state, a real destination restaurant, that brings a lot of people to downtown Montclair and contributes greatly, to the downtown, people coming to town, circulating around, visiting other locations, becoming more familiar with the town. I think the benefits of this restaurant are obvious to everyone. The applicant has, obviously invested tremendously in improving the building and now looking to invest more money with this additional improvement in order to continue to, well, not only to thrive, but really to survive in dealing with occupancy limitations resulting from COVID, et cetera. I think there's just, nothing but positives about this restaurant and positive benefits to the community with what's proposed this evening. In terms of detriment, well, first of all, the parking, again, I think we've already amended our application and would request that the board grant whatever variance is determined to be required after determining the actual increase in usable square feet over and above the 15% requirement, which triggers a parking variance. I think it's pretty obvious from the calculations that it's a minimum number of parking spaces for which a variance is required. And as I've said numerous times already, we're not adding anything to the existing capacity of the restaurant or the outdoor seating area. The other variance for the rear yard setback, again, the benefits are the same. The detriments, I don't believe there are any. The restaurant building butts up against the rear property line. The Investors Bank building on the other side of the courtyard essentially covers the entire lot and goes up to the rear property line. We're seeking to simply extend the rear wall of the restaurant building and attach the enclosure to the rear wall of the Investors Bank building. So there's no greater, there's already essentially a 0-foot setback in the rear. And in addition to that, as this board well knows, since it's only been a matter of several months, I believe, since you approved the application finally for development of a structure on the Church Street lot, that building is going to be directly behind the seating area. I believe the first level of that building is parking. And I don't believe the fact that this glass enclosure is along the property line will have any detriment whatsoever to the building to the rear, particularly when you consider the fact that, this is If the glass wasn't there, people looking from that site now would see the courtyard and the outdoor parking area. With the glass there, they're going to see the outdoor, parking, the outdoor seating area in the courtyard, but through the glass. It's clear, it's not a solid brick wall, and again, little if any impact whatsoever. So I think the variances are justified. I think our witnesses have addressed all the concerns regarding site plan, including drainage and snow loads and everything else. So I think this is a very good application for a very good restaurant, and I would hope that the board would approve it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tremler. All right, well, I like to cut right to the chase. I agree with most of what Mr. Tremulak has said. I think that in terms of the variances needed to approve the application, that they're justified, that this is not going to have any impact on our parking that isn't already there, and that even though this is a structure, it's a building that's being created, it's more of a technicality, and because of its transparent nature, it's not going to create a detriment to the area. In fact, it's probably going to be considered more of an enhancement because it'll provide a year-round outdoor space, so to speak. I think we do need to place a condition, as I've indicated earlier in the proceedings, with respect to maintaining the current seating and capacities. Of course, we'll highlight to our building department, that due consideration to all safety issues with respect to this unique construction for the town be given. But I'm sure, I have no doubt that will occur. And so that is my motion with conditions and our standard conditions also that the board goes along with these types of approvals. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any further comments?
Just,
Oh, what are we voting on? We're voting on a variance?
Excuse me?
Are we voting on a variance?
Are we voting on a variance? Yes.
Okay, I'm good then. Thanks.
Okay.
my one question was item number 2 on Ms. Talley's memo about the non-residential development fee. Is that something the applicants agreed to?
I think we're required to agree to that. I mean, if it's a code requirement, then certainly we have to make that payment. So,
And I'm all set.
It is a code requirement. If you don't pay it to us, you pay it to the state.
right.
I'm set, thanks.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I don't know if you want me to call the roll or you just do it all at once.
Let's just do it all at once.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right, gentlemen, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Sincerely wish you good fortune with this and look forward to experiencing it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's if everybody's good, let's keep going. We just have a couple of other items. And even though we haven't had a recess, I'm willing to trudge on if everybody else is. All right. So I believe the next thing on our agenda is for our executive session, right, Janice?
Yes, if you hold on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to,
Don't we need a motion, Art, to go into executive session?
Yes.
So moved.
all in
Second.
favor?
Oh, need a second.
I need a second. Okay, sorry.
I tried
It's
to
getting
second
late.
it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so Rick, you're gonna that because the bill was only $493, not 4,000.
Wow, good catch.
But
That's why
yeah,
you're our CFO.
I did get an email today from Dennis Galvin. The litigation is continuing with Lackawanna Plaza, even with the new property owner. And David Plasek has his own attorney now involved in the litigation, and we'll see where it goes.
Who's his law firm? You know?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't want to say. Oh, Ann Babineau. I think Ann Babineau is working with him. Who's an excellent land use attorney. I don't know if she was involved in this, but I do know she's working with him.
Ann is great. She's really good.
Yeah. So, okay. So is there a motion to approve the bills?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, well, I will see all of you, maybe, hopefully, next week, because we have a meeting next Monday.
Same bad time, same bad channel.
Hi.
All right.
Okay, good night.
Have a
Good
good
night,
evening.
everybody.